everybody. Hey, replay watchers. Welcome back to the after party, I suppose you could call it. I'm going to give people a few minutes to jump on live. It's 8:02, so my 8-ish was right on. But I'm going to preface this with a big but. My husband took our daughter out to the movies tonight for an early Father's Day date. And my youngest, my 2-year-old, Colin, is kind of battling the tail end of the same cold that I am. And he's been a little bit fussy tonight. He normally goes down without a peep, but he's been a little bit fussy. So if I have to step away, I will come back and this video will just be in 2 parts. I'm hoping that's not the case. I'm going to try to talk a little quick and get us through this. But this topic tonight is so important to me and near and dear to my heart. So I want to make sure you get all of the information that you can. I want to start with a bit of a poll, and I'd really love to see a few people live just to see if kind of pop quiz sort of style. So I'm going to wait just a minute. Essentially what we're going to go over tonight is who is in control of emotions, who's in control of making decisions that foster emotional health, and how do we decide how much control we take versus how much control we give to our kids. So that's kind of the synopsis of what tonight is going to be about. We're going to talk about the formative years. We're going to talk about behavioral control versus psychological control. We are going to talk about how to help your kids make smart, safe decisions. I'm going to give you a couple of key phrases you might be able to use. So that's what I hope to do with us tonight. Tell me what you're up to. Make sure you say hi when you jump in the live. I'm just going to do something real quick on my phone here for this video. Bear with me. If you're catching the replay, I will make sure to post when you can skip to get to the real content so you're not just sitting here waiting for everybody. I will go ahead and give a shameless plug. So Phoenix Family Birth has its own Facebook page at facebook.com/PhoenixFamilyBirth. Many of you have probably seen it. It's shared from time to time here in this group. We offer several different types of services to families though, and one of the things that I am incredibly passionate about is sleep and sleep for families. So rather than taking over our entire Facebook page with a whole bunch of sleep content coming at you all at once, I've decided to make an affiliate page. So we have a page called Sleep by Phoenix Family Birth, and that's where you can go to get all of your tips, techniques, tricks, education, all sorts of little tidbits about sleep for newborns, for infants, for toddlers, for preschoolers, and even for your teenagers and yourselves as adults. So be sure to follow that page and make sure that you're getting all that great information. So I don't see anybody jumping on here, so I'm just going to go ahead and dive right in. Okay, pop quiz. Oh, someone just joined us. Perfect. You're here right in time for the pop quiz. Say hi so I know who I'm testing. They couldn't hang. They couldn't handle the pop quiz. Oh, someone's here. Who is it? Oh, and now they're gone. All right. So here's your pop quiz. I want you to think about children who are 0, so newborn, or really you can even go back as far as conception, however you choose to define that, from 0 to 3 years old. Write down, jot down, grab a pen or type it into the box or the comment box. Type into the comment box in a percentage. How much percentage do you think that children who are 0 to 3 have of their world? Over their entire world, their entire dominion, how much control, what percentage of control do 0 to 3-year-olds have of their world? Then type in the comment box or jot it down next to you. In terms of percentage, how much control do you think that 3 to 5-year-olds have over their world? So we have 0 to 3. What percentage of control do they have over their dominion? And 3 to 5-year-olds, how much control do they have? We're going to do the same for children who are 6 years to 13 years old. How much control do they have? How much say and power do they have over their world? What about 13 to 18, those teen years? How much control do kids have? Do people have from 13 to 18? What percentage of the control are they responsible for? And from ages 18 to 25, how much control do people have over their lives, generally speaking? Drop it in the comment box or jot it down. So let's see how you did. From ages 0 to 3, our kiddos have darn near close to 0% control of their lives. Even the most well-versed, educated, parents who study psychology, those people's children have very little actual control of their world. Parents are calling the shots from 0 to 3. What do you eat? When do you eat? Where do you sleep? How do you sleep? When do you sleep? What do you wear? How is your hair? How often do you brush your teeth and bathe and take care of hygiene things? Who do you get to see and visit with and socialize with? Who is your caregiver? All of those things are controlled by parents, right? So 0 to 5%. If you said somewhere between 0 and 5%, give yourself a point. You got it. Our 3 to 5-year-olds have about 5% or so, somewhere between 5 and on the very high end, 10% of control over their entire existence. That's not much. Imagine only having a 5% say in your entire day. But now you have the tools to express what you want. You can say, I don't want to eat that broccoli. I don't want to go to bed. I don't want to leave grandma's house. But even though you're expressing it, it's still not really up to you. If you said between 5 and 10% for 3 to 5-year-olds, give yourself a point. From ages 6 to 13, how much percent do those kiddos have? About 15%. They get to make some of their decisions. They get to have a little bit of control. They're kind of testing the waters with that. As they get a little bit older, a little bit more responsible, we start to give them the reins just a bit. Give yourself a point if you said somewhere between 10 to 20% for 6 to 13-year-olds. 13 to 18-year-olds. They have about, depending on the parenting style, depending on the family and the values and the culture, 13 to 18-year-olds have about 30 to 50% of control over their lives. That's how much say they get in their worlds. So at most, about half the decisions that they make are actually made by them. You might think your kid is getting up and going to school of their own free will, but are they? They're probably going so that you don't lose your crap or the police don't get called or, those kinds of things. They're not really making that decision autonomously. Give yourself a point if you said 30 to 50% for that age group. And last but not least, 18 to 25-year-olds, how much percent do they have over their life? Darn near 100%. You could argue that it's less than that because there are things and structures like laws, but almost all of the control around their world is handed over to them. So think about that. when we're raising our children in today's average society, our kiddos never really have much more than about 50% of control over all the decisions made throughout their day. Suddenly they turn 18 and it's like, bam, see you later, good luck. Okay? Well, the problem with that, y'all, is that the most formative years for emotional regulation, for fostering independence and interdependence, for securing attachment and learning about healthy relationships, that happens in that age group of 0 to 3. That's when our kids' brains are truly solidifying the synapses and forming the neurons that guide things like attachment, confidence, risk-taking, problem-solving. All of those kinds of things happen most largely from 0 to 3, and even arguably 0 to 5. But we don't give them any say in what happens. We don't give them any control. We don't give them tools to develop those things because we're controlling between 100 and 95% of their worlds, right? So then we have these 18 to 25-year-olds. Well, this is where we know that our prefrontal cortex, which we talked about a little bit last night, that's that frontal part of the brain up here against your forehead. That's where logic, decision-making, reasoning, ability to discern safe, that's where those neurons are finally solidifying. Your brain is not really set. You don't know who you are really as a human until about 25. So we go from giving our kids no control to giving them every bit of control, and often releasing them with very few tools for how to regulate emotions, decision making, and logic, and yada yada. So what do we do? How can we fix this? How can we give the reins over a little bit so that our kids are able to develop these skills early on? I'll tell you. Okay, so those formative years, those 0 to 3. One of the biggest things that comes up here is the concept of attachment. You may think of it in terms, if you've heard of attachment parenting. Attachment parenting is a name of a parenting style coined by Dr. Sears that largely means that parents are placing the baby's needs above their own full-time, 100% of the time. The baby runs the show. The baby's the center of the universe. Baby is sleeping in bed with parents or right next to the bed with parents. Baby is breastfeeding. Baby is being worn in a carrier, sling, or wrap at all times, or most of the time. And so really the idea of it is that babies build a secure attachment to parents because they are with them all the time. Now, I've said it before and I'll say it again. If attachment parenting works for you and it works for your kids, by all means, run with it. I am not here to say that any type of parenting style is better or worse than another. They're just different. I can tell you that I had a very mainstream parenting style with my first, a very hardcore attachment parenting style with my second, and then I kind of met somewhere in the middle with our third. But really, when we're talking about attachment at a psychological and developmental level, attachment does not mean reliance. And sometimes in attachment parenting, the philosophy gets shared that the children need to learn to rely on the parents. They need to develop trust. They need to create a bond. But attachment parenting itself, wearing your baby, breastfeeding your baby, bed sharing with your baby, those aren't the things that determine whether your kids have trust and a bond with you, okay? Attachment means that your kiddos feel secure and that they feel stable, that you're their home base. So kiddos with true strong attachments, and this is regardless of any parenting style, I'm moving away from this concept of attachment parenting as a style, just in general, for children to have a healthy, secure attachment to their parent, it needs to include that they can be separated from their parent because they trust that that parent will come back. It means that they need to have a little bit of space to struggle because they need to problem solve and risk take and figure things out on their own within reason. It means that they need to have room to fail. They need to learn that everything isn't always going to go their way 100% of the time. But then when it doesn't, they can come back to their home base, that parent, and that everything's okay. The parent is going to be responsive and warm, and they're going to meet those needs. They're going to listen to whatever the feeling is. Part of attachment is also that your children can form attachments with others. Sometimes we get into that, like, we call it helicopter parenting, where we're hovering over our kids so often because no one else can do it right, and we're afraid we're going to mess up the system. And no, this is the way that she likes her food fed to her, and this is the way that he likes to be bounced exactly like this, even though he's happy in someone else's arms. Children need to be able to have attachments with other caregivers as well, be that grandparents, aunts and uncles, siblings. Daycare providers are a really big one, especially for us working parents. We often get really stressed out about, oh my gosh, my baby's going to think I abandoned them when I take them to daycare. No, they're going to learn that they can have a secure attachment to another adult, and that's normal and healthy. They will always still prefer you. They will always be more attached to you than a daycare provider, I promise. One of the other things that comes up in terms of giving babies control and giving kids control in that 0 to 3 is, what do we do when a baby cries? What do? We make them stop. And sometimes that's appropriate. Sometimes we're soothing. Sometimes we're comforting, especially in a newborn. They don't have self-soothing skills. They don't have the capability to regulate their emotions. We need to comfort and soothe newborns as often as they need to be comforted and soothed. But as our babies get a little bit older and they start to have a sense of self-awareness and they start to have a sense of wanting to exert control over their world, we're often not giving babies and toddlers room to do that because we want them to be quiet, because we have romanticized this idea that happy mood equals happy child, which in a lot of cases is accurate. But a lot of times too, we're so busy quieting our babies, putting a pacifier in their mouth or running into the bedroom to pick them up at night, that we're not giving them that space to have that control. Remember, they have about 0% control at this stage, and we can expand that by giving them a little bit of space. So many times, for example, when I'm sleep training, when I'm going to a family's house to help them help their own children sleep through the night, one of the things that happens most often is that baby starts to just fuss. And maybe they're rubbing their eyes a little bit and they're frustrated because they're trying to roll over, but they're not, from me not having an emotional attachment to that baby, me not having a biological response to hearing their cry, I objectively can say, the baby is just frustrated. Give them a minute, they'll figure it out. And sure enough, they either get their thumb into their mouth or they roll over and get comfortable. Sometimes their cry is just because it's a habit. And then sometimes babies cry because they have a need. Maybe they're hungry. Maybe their diaper is wet or dirty. Maybe they're too hot, they're too cold. But because we as parents are so resistant to hearing our own babies cry, we don't learn their voice. It's really that simple. Oftentimes sleep training for my clients is that simple. Learn your baby's voice. Learn the difference between how they cry when they are just like, hey, this is weird. Why aren't you coming running in the first 2 seconds that I whimpered, to, okay, I really need help. I spit up and it's wet and I can't get out of it. So part of fostering emotional health is giving our kids room to feel those emotions, really starting at a young age. I want to be really, really clear that in no way am I advocating leaving your baby alone to cry for long periods of time. In no way am I advocating hearing a baby cry and just saying, too bad, they gotta cry. If they have a need, you must meet it. That's your job as a parent. You need to meet your children's needs. What I'm talking about is those older babies who are just learning to express themselves and express their opinion, but don't yet have the language to do so. I hope I'm making sense, and I'm hoping that you're understanding the clear difference there, because I want to distinguish between the two. It's really important. So, in order to allow our kids to have a lot more than 0 to 30% of control growing up. We obviously need to be in charge of decisions about safety, health, hygiene. Those things are going to be our responsibility. It's as simple as that. There's no other way to like euphemize it. But we can create situations that are safe and that have defined parameters where our kids can make some of their own decisions. So when we talk about control with parenting, I mentioned at the beginning, there's two types of control. There's behavioral control and psychological control. In behavioral control, it's constraining your child's behavior to meet the needs of others. It's kind of measured as strictness. It's holding your kids and forcing them to conform to high standards. Psychological control is about the extent to which parents control their children's emotions and beliefs. This is where guilt and shame come up. Oh, it's not that big of a deal, just stop crying. Or, oh, you're so dramatic. Or, I really think that you don't need to be that sad about this. Like, it's just a toy. Okay? Or, I'm only going to be gone 5 minutes. I don't understand why you're so upset. Just get over it. I'll be back in 5 minutes. Some of that happens because we're exhausted and touched out and worn out, and we're normal, human, imperfect beings, and that's okay. You're not screwing up your kid, I promise. But at some point, we have to balance that frustration with validation. So allow your kids to make some of those decisions. Allow natural consequences over punishments. So for example, your kiddo's sitting at the dinner table, and she knocks over her glass of milk. What do? What would be your reaction? There's no wrong answer here. Most parents, especially, again, us working parents that have had a long day and we're just finally getting home and dinner is chaotic, we're probably going to snap at them. I told you 100 times to be careful with your cup. Look what you did. Oh my gosh. That's the typical normal response. And you're not wrong. But instead of, you need to go to timeout because I told you to be careful and you weren't, and you were just being careless and you knocked it over. What about a natural consequence? Well, you knocked over your cup of milk, so you need to be the one to clean it up. A 2 and 3-year-old, even that young, they're able to be handed a towel and sop up the milk off the table. Perhaps your child is throwing their toys. Or if you have children like my boys, they're using those swords to their full degree and they're whacking those swords on the walls and the furniture, and you've told them 100 times to stop, but they don't listen because they're kids and they want to have control. It's a human desire to want control, to want power. And then the sword breaks. Well, honey, that's a natural consequence of your decision. You chose to hit with your toy that's not meant to be hit against the wall, and now it's broken. So now we're going to have to get rid of that sword. I'm very sorry. Okay, so rather than focusing on punishment, just focus on consequence. And when I say consequence, I want to make sure that we're also framing that for kids without the connotation of positive and negative, or good consequences and bad consequences. There's no such thing. Consequences are just neutral. Consequences are what happen after we make a choice. So, for example, let's say, what's one that's happened for us recently? I don't know. Let's say your kiddo really wants a bubble bath. And they've been asking for it all day and they're so excited about this bubble bath. But now it's time and you're like, it's time to get in the bath, Bobby, let's go. And they're like, no, I want to finish this episode of Paw Patrol. Just wait, I don't want to go. Okay, let's talk about the consequences of these choices. You can make the choice you want to make, you decide, but I want you to understand the consequences. If you choose to keep watching Paw Patrol, you won't have time to play in your bath. We're going to wash and get out. If you choose to turn off Paw Patrol now, you get to go into the bath and you get to wash, and then you get to play with all your bath toys for 15 minutes or however. You don't even have to give it a time. Then you have time to play. What would you like to do? Which consequence sounds like what you want to happen? Okay. Perhaps your kid doesn't want to put their shoes on. Okay, but we're going out to the car in 2 minutes. If you have your shoes on, you get to walk to the car and you get to buckle yourself in, and your feet won't get burned because you have shoes on. However, if you choose not to put your shoes on, your feet are going to be very hot walking to the car and walking over the gravel, and you're probably not going to have enough time to buckle yourself, so mommy's going to have to buckle you today. What sounds like the action you want to happen? So those are simple ways that we can give our kids control throughout the day. There's a method called Love and Logic, if you're familiar with it. I used it as a teacher all the time. I've used it as a parent reliably for years. Love and Logic is essentially taking the emotion out of decision making and giving your kids as many decisions as humanly possible throughout the day. Like, give them decision fatigue. But you make sure that both options are something that you can live with. So rather than, do you want to get dressed? You can choose to get dressed or not get dressed. You can say, do you want to put the red shirt on or the blue shirt on? Rather than, do you want to walk to the car? It's, do you want to run to the car or hop to the car? Rather than, do you want to eat dinner tonight, or, do you want to eat your broccoli and get a treat? Do you want to eat your broccoli with a fork, or do you want to eat your broccoli with your fingers? Like, you can get really creative with what choices you give your kids, and then they don't realize that it's kind of a rigged system. They just feel that sense of empowerment of, yes, I have control over my world. I have power. So that's a really simple way to give your kids an initial sense of power. From there, you can grow that space and really start to let them make those decisions and live with the natural consequences without having to talk through them quite so much. They start to learn to think ahead for consequences, keeping in mind that that happens mostly in the prefrontal cortex, and our kiddos before their teen years don't really have a whole lot of foresight. So they're not going to be able to make a choice about, well, if I eat this pack of M&Ms at lunch, I won't get any dessert after dinner. Most kids can't handle a choice with that much time in between. So they're still going to need some scaffolds there. The last point that I want to touch on, it was actually brought up a little bit, I think it was last night that it got posted, an article about, instead of saying no to your kids, how you can reframe things in a positive way. And I think that this needs to go beyond just saying no to our kids, but also how we teach them about safety and decision making. So when my kiddos are at the playground, my husband and I have a very different approach. He tends to be a little bit more helicopter on the playground equipment than I do. And so we had to come to a compromise. Rather than him standing there like helping them up the slide or up the stairs and down the slide every single time, it was like, dude, you got to give them some space. They've got to learn how to do this on their own. That's important. But he was like, yeah, but you can't just like be 10 feet away. What if they're going to fall? So we did, hey, Kai, welcome. So we had to come to a compromise, and we had to learn some creative ways to give our kids the message like, don't climb on that, or don't touch that. Like those kinds of things that we naturally want to say don't and no, we have to reframe it in a way that allows our kids to come up with their own answer. So rather than don't climb on that, you can say, do you have a plan to get down from there? Or rather than don't climb on those rocks, do you notice that those rocks feel slippery under your feet? How are you going to make sure that you're being safe? If they're climbing, you can say, do you feel stable? Do you feel like you have body control to keep climbing? You can say, if you feel like you can't go any further, please ask for help. You can say something like, where are you going to put your foot next? That way they know that you're tuned into them but they are ultimately making the decision about what happens next, okay? So really, to sum up this last half hour, our kids have very little control in our culture. Between 0 and 30% is all the control we give them in all of their years growing up. And then we thrust them into adulthood and say, "How you have 100%, good luck. Figure out emotions and emotional regulation and relationships and communication and attachment and confidence and risk-taking and problem solving." And our kiddos are set up to fail. So instead, we want to reframe the decisions and the power that we give them. We want them to learn to have control. We want them to make decisions and be empowered to take risks and to have successes, as well as having failures in a safe place. And no matter whether they're successful or unsuccessful at their choice, or whether the outcome is what they wanted or not what they wanted, the most important piece of a secure attachment and children having a healthy relationship and worldview, a healthy form of psychological development and behavioral control and self-regulation, is that they have a home base to come to. You are their home base. You will support them. You will validate and hear their feelings and concerns without minimizing or shaming. You'll help them get to the next step after you've given them some room to try themselves. Okay? So, if you have any questions as you're catching the replay, feel free to drop them in the comments. You can message them to me. You can post them separately in the group, whatever you're most comfortable with. I would love to hear what you all think about this concept of control. Does it surprise you how little control we truly give our kids and how strong of an impact that has on them in adulthood? What's been your experience? How much control did you have growing up? What type of home did you grow up in, and what result did that yield as you entered into your adult stage? That's all I got for you tonight. I hope that you all have a really great evening or morning or afternoon, depending on what time of day you're watching this. I will be happy to jump in and answer any questions that I can for you. And happy hump day. Bye, y'all.